Hey everybody, it's Big Dave, and I am just sharing my words about my good friend Jim Caple. I'm currently in Seattle. Just left his memorial service, his beautiful memorial service, and just want to read you what I said about him. Legends are individuals who have not only distinguished themselves by doing something that affects your life, but also your actions afterwards. They make you better. Because of that, you can't stop talking about him. That said, Jim Caple is a legend. I say this because I first met Jim in 2007 when I was about to ride my bicycle across Asia from Istanbul to Beijing as a part of my ongoing personal mission to hug as many people around the world as I could after my friend was killed in the World Trade Center attacks. Because it was a quasi-sports story, I reached out to everyone at ESPN, and I do mean everyone. But I knew it was a long shot without my being famous, sponsored, or anything other than just a dude. But Jim responded, even though he didn't have to. We arranged to meet in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the day before I was supposed to fly to Istanbul for this 5-month trip, when he was coming there to interview Floyd Landis, who had just won the Tour de France. Having an ESPN writer do a story on you is a big deal, but even the tiniest bit of doubt in your brain can grow to be an even bigger deal. So as I drove the 90 miles from Philly to Lancaster, that doubt grew. I thought, this dude is going to write a few thousand words about Floyd Landis, the tour, American cycling, and then write 50 words about me. And I thought, I'm going to be an afterthought. I thought, the nerve of this dude. And I got pissed off, excuse me, and for a brief moment, I stopped the car and I thought I should just turn around. I didn't. But I did whip myself into a frenzy, and I barked at Jim when I first met him. I told him, I said, look, dude, I know what's going to happen. I know what you're going to write. Floyd, 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 Floyd. And oh, by the way, I met this big motherfucker named Dave. I then referenced the movie Almost Famous, and it's a movie about an up-and-coming rock band. And there was one scene where one member told a writer from Rolling Stone, whatever you do your absolute best to make us look cool. And so with that, I said, Jim, just make me look cool. I said, can you do that? Now, Jim could have told me to kick rocks, but he didn't. Instead, he assured me that everything would be okay. And he spent the next few hours cycling up and down the hills of Lancaster with me, talking about life. I had a good feeling about Jim when we hugged goodbye, but I had an even better feeling when Jim called me the next day and talked to me as I was in the airport, right up until the point where I got seated on my flight to Istanbul. I returned from that trip the day before Thanksgiving, and though we didn't have to, Jim called me to welcome me back home and remarked about my honoring my word. When I asked what he was talking about, Jim referenced an aside that I made about my making a promise to my mother when I was a kid that I would spend every Christmas and Thanksgiving with her. I thought, who would remember that? Jim would. Because a person's word and integrity point is their prime driving force, and that meant a lot to Jim. Weeks later, ESPN called me to say that Jim had been telling them I was a good guy and a good story and a good writer and deserved a shot to write my story of traveling the world, creating hugs, high fives, and moments of happiness. This surprise opportunity was just immense, but it was also daunting, and so I called Jim for advice. Jim had done so much for me, man. He really had. And he didn't have to do anything more. But he did. And he said, write what's in your heart, Dave. It's all there. I believe Jim. So I wrote with my heart. And the article was a hit. It stayed on the ESPN homepage for almost 2 weeks. And to celebrate this, I biked the nation again, stopping and volunteering my days off at local charities. Again, Jim didn't have to. But he called me weekly for updates to discuss how the experiences of my volunteering at domestic violence shelters and hospices, in old folks' homes and drug addiction centers, how all that was changing me. Jim's insightful questions incited me to think deeper, even deeper about what I was doing. And by my tour's end, I could see a book on my travels. Again, this is a recurring theme. Jim didn't have to, but he got me a room for my last night when I finally bicycled into New York City. And while I was there, I called him. He lives in Seattle. I called him and I said, look, dude, I know what I want people to feel after reading about my stories. You know, I want you to write the book about me. And Jim said that he was honored, but he was on a deadline and he would answer me later. And so I hung up the phone confidently, knowing that he would say yes. But Jim called me weeks later to say no. I was like, no, I thought we were boys. And he said, we are. And he said, but you have the talent, Dave. You write it. And this was such a simple, beautiful, powerful, and pivotal thing for him to say and me to hear, because I think we're all looking for permission to be bigger, better, bolder, but only act upon these burgeoning impulses when given permission and someone gives you just a little glimpse of your own potential. So with Jim's permission, I got to work. And when I finished my draft, I flew out here to Seattle to place my manuscript in his hands. He didn't need to read it that night, but he did. And he began marking it up, and he left it on, left it at my door. And the first words he wrote were, good job. There's a lot of good stuff here. It was always nice to call Jim with updates as I polished the draft, because I could hear the happiness in his voice. And Jim wrote the foreword to my book, and when I first got it, I cried when I was reading his words. In one paragraph, he wrote, Big Dave is a powerful man, and when he hugs you, you feel it. He lifts you up off the ground, fitting because he also figuratively lifts you beyond your horizon. Funny, friendly, and a force of nature, these chapters will be as gripping as one of Big Dave's hugs. But as pleased as Jim was, he did have one issue with the book. He asked me, he said, hey man, could my name be any smaller on the cover? And I was like, nah, dude, I just, he always called my book my baby, and I just wanted everyone to know he had nothing to do with it other than writing the foreword. Jim didn't have to write my story. Jim didn't have to counsel me about writing my book. Jim didn't have to get me the opportunity to write at ESPN. Jim didn't have to invite me to his home. He didn't have to invite me to his life. He didn't have to remember to call me on my birthday. He didn't have to get me a hotel room. He didn't have to do any of the shit that he did for me, but he did. And because of his actions, I'm even more forthright in helping, motivating, and inspiring others. But when I offer help to people, sometimes, a lot of times, they're skeptical and cynical about my motives. And they ask me, why are you doing this for me? And that's when I always take the opportunity to share a story about one of my life's trajectory altering angels and say, let me tell you a story about Jim Caple, a man who did more, so much more than make me look cool. A man that made me better, and a man that's a fucking legend. I love you, Jim. I really do. You have changed my life in an immeasurable number of ways. I've known Jim Caple since 2007, but I only saw him 3 times in person. 3 times. The first time for him to interview me, the second time he happened to be in Philadelphia, and the third time when I placed the manuscript in his hands. But Jim has always been there for me, to talk to me, to help me through, talk me through writer's blocks, to just whatever. He's just, I love him so much. And he helped me be, like I said, be better and just be a better man. And all I can say is Jim Caple really is a legend. And rest in peace, brother. So thank you for looking at this, and just thank you. All right. Hugs and love, everybody.